Welcome back to the BISP 2024 School Podcast. I'm Vanshika. I'm in year 13.
My name is Paige. I'm also in year 13.
Today we have our university counselor, Miss Amy, joining us on this podcast where we can get to know a little bit more about her and university counseling at BISP. So Miss Amy, I'd like to introduce you, and can you tell me a little bit about your personal background and a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. So in terms of my personal background, I am Thai. I grew up here until I was about 6, and that's when I moved to the US. My family immigrated over there. So we ended up in this town in Baltimore, Maryland, and that's pretty much where I grew up. I went to a public high school there, graduated with a class of about 2,000 kids, really big, and received my bachelor's and master's degree at 22 from Johns Hopkins University in clinical counseling. And fun fact is that my career actually started in social emotional counseling. So I'm actually what we call a comprehensive counselor. So I do half social emotional and then half university guidance. And I actually moved to Arizona, and that's where I met Mr. Tom for a PhD program, but I fell in love and dropped out of school and then moved overseas. So that's a little bit of a quick snippet background.
That's what brings you here.
Yeah.
And how long have you been at BISP?
This is my second year at BISP.
Okay.
And how long have you been a university counselor?
So in order for you to become a licensed counselor, you have to have a master's and do 3,000 hours. So I would say I finished my master's 22. I have ever since become a counselor. So without sharing my age, I've probably been doing university counseling for about 13 years, and then social emotional probably about 20 years.
It's a really long time. So what got you interested in university counseling and counseling in general?
I'm very interested in working with people. I think that's something about university advising and social emotional counseling that I really like, is that there's almost an end and something that I can measure, as my point of success is when I can launch my kids out into the world, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I find university counseling so rewarding, is because there is that little bit of an end point. And in social emotional counseling, it serves a different purpose, because at times you don't really see that, okay, well, maybe after our time together, maybe there will be some techniques that gets integrated in, but you don't really see that right away. So it's almost like an open-ended things where maybe I have helped someone, but maybe 20 years down the line, that's when that will start, being different for that person. But I think it keeps a balance, for me as a professional doing both roles. So I get to launch kids and see the end, and then I kind of get to have an open-ended. I wonder what happened to this person that I've worked with 20 years ago,
That's really interesting. And can you tell me a little bit about what applications you oversee at school?
So many.
What countries?
Yeah, so many. I think the general overview is that there are so many applications all over the world that we work with, right? Because our students is international, and with that international mindset and their destination also more global. So if anything, the applications that we handle is pretty much all over. And what makes it easier for us is that there are general hubs that we can use to maximize. So for example, there's Common App in the US or UCAS in the UK, StudyLink in the Netherlands. And outside of those major hubs, there's still little bits of individual applications that we have to get to know. So we handle applications from all over here.
I agree. And I think especially at BIS, we have a range of different types of students that are interested in different things. We obviously have a very prominent student athlete body, and we have a lot of students that are interested in medicine or academics. So it's really interesting to see that you're overlooking all of these different applications.
Yeah, and in terms of the start of your career as a university counselor, or even now, are there any significant challenges that you've faced along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think along the same lines of getting to know applications all over the world, because each system, and if you think about it, the international baccalaureate, it's not really a national system. It's an international system. And then when our students use as a credential, or, BTech, for example, that we have here is a British system. So there's a direct entry there, and it's quite easily recognized, right? And if you look at the IB, it's not a national it's not a national curriculum. So what happens is you do have to find a fit in terms of how does this fit in this country application. And to continue onwards with that, I think the one other significant challenge is maybe helping kids narrow down, where they want to go, just so the process isn't overwhelming if they want to go in 5 different countries and having to manage all of those applications themselves.
And that kind of relates to my next question. In terms of students who are looking to take a gap year or maybe alternative post BISP plans, how do you approach that?
I love gap years. I think it's something that nowadays it's becoming more of a learning opportunity. And I would have that conversation with the students and family because personally for me, I would want all of my students to get the experience of applying with that cohort. And there are options after you apply. You can select a deferment. And if you get offers, you don't have to go. But I really do think going through the motion with your class, I think it gives you a little bit of a life administration experience. So even if you were to take a gap year or look for work or internship, I think both Mr. Tucker and I really help students do that. And if anything, I want to encourage them to go through the process of applying. So that way, things like keeping organized, learning how to make a plan, and meeting goals is something that they can do, and it's not like they have to take the offers. They can apply and select a deferment or take a gap year after that application. But I think it's nice to have that in common with your class.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice experience when all you and all your friends are applying to university at the same time. I think it brings everyone together, amidst all of the stress that we generally have in school. Having something to look forward to when you graduate is just really wholesome. And it's really nice that gap years and alternative pathways are being more and more recognized because every individual is different. And so meeting their needs and tailoring the university and post BISP planning system towards every different person is really important, and it's really helpful for everyone.
I definitely can understand that, and I think it's such a great opportunity to develop skills that you'll need in university and really find your passion and delve into that a bit more.
So I'm interested to know, over the years, university applications and the process usually changes. Can you tell me about how applying to university was for you?
Absolutely. It was definitely an easier process. I didn't think about going abroad. So I finished high school in the US, and of course, I just went through its national curriculum, which is American high school diploma. I took the SATs like everybody else, and I took AP classes like everybody else. And without having that global mindset yet back in the early 2000s, it was quite a direct transition. So I applied to university. I actually wanted to join the Air Force in the very beginning because I wanted to travel and see the world, And my mom was just like, no, I don't know, because it's actually entering the military. So she was like, just apply to a university, and if you don't get in, then we'll talk about it. So I applied to one university in my state, and I happened to get in. So I thought that it was quite of a seamless process, and that could be because it was a direct transition from a national curriculum onto the same country and university,
Yeah, I agree. Do you think the process is a little bit different for international students, particularly because we're applying to university not with a national curriculum, but as you mentioned, with IB or with BTech? Do you think there's any difference in applying depending on what curriculum you do?
Absolutely, especially nowadays. There's a lot more requirements now that universities are putting in place. So it's not just about your secondary qualifications anymore. It's about maybe taking in external examinations if you want to enter medicine or law or other fields that requires that right away. So I definitely think it's a huge difference in that. And I would say it's almost like an advantage doing an international curriculum because both IB and BTech are widely recognized,
Yeah.
So I feel like from that secondary qualifications going to higher education, it looks different, but I feel like it's a little bit better just because I don't know if there was a lot of students in my career path in an international field during my time teaching internationally that they just want to go to one specific country. You usually get a lot more.
And I think being at BIS particularly has really helped the students be holistic and have a well-rounded profile, especially with all the facilities we have for different sports and different artistic or creative aspects. I think it really helps build your profile and build yourself and your personality, not just in terms of academic achievement, but also in terms of other things. And so going a bit off that, what do you think is an aspect of university applications that a lot of students don't pay enough attention to?
That's a great question. I think when students do come and see me, we get to the point a lot and we get where and what you want to study. I feel like a lot of students are just lacking a little bit of the finer details. So things like getting to know the actual university, doing virtual campus tours if you can't go there specifically, or doing thorough research on the actual programs. Like, what does it mean to study psychology at this particular university? So I think we end up focusing a lot on shopping around, and part of me supports that thoroughly because there's so many options out there. So I want to encourage my students to shop around and find the best options for them. But then it becomes quantity versus quality. And if anything, what I want to push more, it's a little bit of a balance in both, right? I want you to do your research. I want you to know what it's like to actually study here. Because oftentimes when student wants to study in the UK, for example, I've never been there, it's a culture shock, coming to you. So there's a level of expectation that, okay, there's some things that I'm not going to know. So I should try to find out as much as I can from what I can do. So I feel like looking at that, it's more important than the how do I get in and what do I want to study. It's looking at what would my life be like if I were to study this subject here.
I completely agree. And US and the UK, I would say, are the most popular destinations that people usually apply to. Can you tell me a little bit about what the main differences are in these two countries in terms of university?
Yes, absolutely. So they are popular destinations, and part of me believes that's because there are application hubs that we talked about earlier that makes it a little bit easier for students to manage. So the major difference to me in US and UK is how the US criteria can be quite vague. Looking at student holistically, we all kind of know what that means, but we don't really know what they're looking for. Are you looking for extracurricular activities? Are you looking for the quality of my essay because I have to write 4 for you? Are you looking for my letters recommendation? How much? What's a percentage of that holistic view that you're focusing on my academics? So lots of things are left. And if you look specific at websites, I don't think you get any more than what I'm giving you now. So I feel like that holistic view, it's almost like a double-edged sword in a way, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because you are a whole person. But you also need a little bit more guidance than that, right? So I feel like that's one thing that the US differs from the UK. And the answer to all of those questions is pretty much it depends, on the university, on what you're bringing to the table, and maybe they're looking at everything. For the UK, it's quite focused on the course that you want to study. Your personal essay should reflect what have you done so that you are suitable for this course. And that could be because the 3 years versus 4 years education. In the UK, you have to select a course right away. But in the US, you can actually go undeclare, undecided for the first 2 years and figure out what you want to do, because you do technically have that extra year, quote unquote. So I feel like that's something that is quite different on both ends, is holistically and what does that mean? And then course specific and what have I done to do this? And you can see how they can definitely be a double-edged sword. One has that flexibility option, and it's not really pushing you, but are you spending more time doing that? And if you want to change your mind, it's quite friendly. But with course specific, if you enter it and you change your mind, then what, right? Or if you enter it and you happen to love it, and that's great because you can get it done in 3 years. So I feel like those are the majority of the difference. There's a lot more, and we can talk about different countries, but we're going to have to take a longer time than the time we have here.
As mentioned, the US has a more holistic approach, but with a lot of universities, wondering, aside from academic performance, what do you think is the most important aspect of completing a strong university application?
So I think that there is a balance for lots of things in a student profile, that you should present. The most important is a little bit hard to answer because it's up to the students. And I think if anything if you're lucky enough, you can identify your passion early on. And that word passion, where does that come from? What if you really like something, but you're not good at it? And what if you're good at that something, but you really don't like it? How do you define what you want to study or what majors you want to study? So I think it depends, and I can give you multiple answers. I think finding your passion and doing what you want to do and hoping that it's something that you want to continue to do later on. I would say get outside of the academic world. And I think here at BISP, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities for students to do that. There's a lot of leadership opportunities that you can make your own. There's a lot of support around that. So I would say any kind of leadership, community service, extracurricular, get them done here. And I would say focus on highlighting what you want to highlight. So before you actually read a prompt on your Common App essay or knowing the structure or Googling what people are looking for in a UCAS personal statement, I say just start creating what you want to present on a rough draft. What kind of person do you want readers to see? And I would actually brainstorm from your brain first rather than responding to what's required. I feel like that would be an important aspect of that.
Yeah, and making the most of all the opportunities that you're provided with at school can also be really beneficial for you to figure out your own passion. A lot of students know early on what they're good at and sort of the field that they want to go into, but making sure that you explore all your options can be so much more helpful, and it can really give you like a more evaluative response, and it can allow you to critically think and really make sure that you know what you're getting into before you apply to university. Mm-hmm. And I really like that you mentioned that, especially in the US and the UK, there's a different level of flexibility. Obviously in the US you can switch between majors and you can switch, but in the UK you can't. So that's something that a lot of students should consider before they decide where they want to apply.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of extracurricular activities or outside of school activities, do you think there are any activities, especially ones offered at BISP, that kind of foster skills that universities look for?
A lot. It depends. I do know that the buzzword nowadays is like international mindedness or global citizenship. So I think as international students, you are in you're in a niche where as an international student or as a third culture kid who's enrolling in an international school, what kind of expectations you have for yourself to be globally minded and what does that mean to you, right? So I think extracurricular activities are important, and there's over 400 activities here that students can do. But what I want to encourage my year 10 and up to do is to initiate something that's not here already, and I think that's something. There's limited opportunities for leadership positions, and rightfully so. You don't want them to be all over the place because then it will diffuse the importance of that. So there's limited numbers of head students, head well-being, etc. But if you are passionate about creating or initiating something, what keeps you from being a leader of that program? And I think that's what I find so wonderful about BISP is if you have an idea and you put it forward with something, that right there gives you an automatic leadership opportunity. It gives you an ability to craft a plan, to review it with leadership team member who will then maybe give you feedback, and then you refine it until you get what you want. If you feel like you're hitting a wall, then you can give up. But that's an actual reflection of what leading an initiative is, right? So if anything, I would want to have students organize and lead things that aren't already in place.
I completely agree. And having an international atmosphere at BIS has only fueled and made that process so much more interesting. I did start my own club this year for Medical Society at BISP. And I love that it was a collaborative project. So although I was in charge and I was leading the club, everyone that I was working with, I think almost everyone in the club was from a different nationality. So even just looking at healthcare, which is something that I'm interested in, everyone had a different perspective and they had different insight into things that we were discussing. And I think that really fostered an environment where we were coming up with creative solutions to problems. We were coming up with creative ways and unique ways to implement our knowledge into applying it to the real world and coming up with, creative passion projects. So I think the international and global mindset at school really, really fostered that. And it was really
Yeah.
important.
I was thinking similarly when I like obviously these leadership skills are really important and I've definitely like developed mine so much through after school curricular, but collaboration skills as well. I feel compared to when I first joined the school now because of Model United Nations and peer support group, I'm so much better at teamwork as well as like being able to organize and lead things, which is so important.
And another thing to add to that too, I think both of you made a really good point, is that when we're thinking about extracurricular activities, we can think outside the box. And that's one thing that we have here. Both of you were able to do internships over the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of these opportunities were initiated by you. You bring it up to the school helps sponsor it, and then you made it happen, right? And I think both of you were in different places of that.
Yeah.
But the concept of partnering outside of school is totally supported, and if you were to initiate that, talk to the school about it, and then we can help support that initiative to bring it to life, if it's something that's doable and
It was always
Yeah.
encouraged. Yeah.
I'm definitely so grateful for Mr. Tucker. He made the applying process so much easier. And honestly, I think without the internship, I wouldn't really know exactly how passionate I was about going into developmental psychology. I always knew I wanted to go into psychology, but it really solidified the like passion that I have to like help like youth and stuff like that. So it was definitely such an amazing experience for me.
I had a similar experience as well. I was always interested in medicine and healthcare, but I recently found out that I'm also very, very interested in research work. So pure science and research work, which I actually learned through doing the IB. And, we have IAs and we have EEs, which are mini research projects. And I've spent so much time on them. It showed me a different side of medicine, a different side of healthcare that I was even more passionate about. I didn't even know I would be this interested in it. So it was really amazing to have that experience and gradually build onto that passion working with you as you're my university counselor. It was a really good experience. It made everything really smooth. And Paige and I are in year 13, so we're going through the university applications process right now as well. But how early on would you recommend and encourage students to start thinking about post-BIS and about graduating?
As early as you can, I feel like. That seems like a very generic answer. Let me narrow it down a little bit. I think maybe year 10. I think year 10 is a good place to really start thinking about skills that you feel like you're good at. And the reason why I'm saying skills is because I think we have to be prepared for jobs that aren't here. I just recently went to a conference and I was talking to, there was a keynote speaker who was a professor of IT from Melbourne. And he was saying how 10 years ago, you can't imagine jobs like, entrepreneurship or social media influencer or a chief listening officer. I don't even know what that means, but that is a job advertisement. So technically, if you think about when you're actually entering the job field, and especially for kids who are younger, you are preparing yourself for something that may not even hear and we don't know. So what do we then focus on? We focus on skills. And I noticed that Paige was commenting on that a lot rather than a larger area of study. So what kind of skills do I want to focus on? That's something that I feel like if we start breaking them down from a younger age, and if we can kind of have a plan while entering maybe year 10, and it's not like a serious process. Like it's just kind of looking at things like, I'm not sure if I can focus. So maybe there's something that I can do to help me focus. Maybe I can start reading passages or use a highlighter or whatnot. Year 10 could be a good place where you can start narrowing down the skills and then look for certain areas and relate it back to the subjects that you might like. Year 11 is when I think we should start narrowing down a little bit because Mr. Tucker and I often think of long term. I don't think any of our students will have problems getting in university. Like into a university, that's probably the first step, an easy step of a more difficult journey. We're thinking about your passport. We're thinking about if you're looking to go to a university here, but you have a passport from this country here, where are you going to end up working? Because you'll ultimately need sponsorship if you want to work at a country outside of your home passport. So I think it's good to kind of have that thinking process. Like if I want to work in the US, what would I need? And my question would then be, well, it's probably easier for you to gain jobs and networking if you're doing STEAM in the US, or if you want to be a teacher, because teaching in urban areas is often needed in the US, right? If you want to work in Australia, there's this 2-year work right that you can get attached to your student visa right away. So maybe that's an idea. If you're an EU citizen, well, there's a lot of options for you to work there, and you want to kind of look a little bit above and beyond just getting in as well.
Yeah, I definitely think it's so beneficial having university counselors on site, because it makes the experience not only so much smoother, but also more personalizable, because there's someone who knows the process and they can kind of see what kind of person you are, see what you want to study, see the strengths and limitations, and kind of help you with that. Yeah.
And as students, I feel like we tend to focus on the universities we want to go to, the courses we want to study, and sometimes we get lost and don't think about the bigger picture. So it's really nice having someone that's guiding us and looking over at everything, things we might miss out on. So coming to an end, can you tell me what was the most rewarding part of your university, by being university counselor? What's the most rewarding part of it?
I think the most rewarding part is to maybe being able to see growth, So I think an important milestone, if we see it in milestones, is if I'm at a place, and before I came here, I was in a school in Japan for 3 years, and before that I was in a school for 5 years. So I'm a big fan of staying in one place. So the first milestone is seeing students from maybe, whatever year I started that school until graduation. And I love being a part of graduation. I get so emotional to see that growth process. So I often end up crying. You probably see me cry at your graduation too this year. And then, so that's the first milestone. Second milestone is the keeping in touch piece. And I think that's what I love the most. And the most rewarding for me is the keeping in touch, and that can come in when students come back and do a campus visit, or they are active on like alumni platform and offer to come and do a talk. And I've known this particular student for 12 years, and she is now in Colombia studying a master's degree to become a counselor like me. And she was able to complete her internship in Japan where I was at. And maybe if she's done with this program, she might look into doing an internship here, in school counseling. So I like that, the fact that it doesn't seem like it's ending. So yes, there's a point where I can launch you, but then eventually, hopefully, if you come back, I feel like that's going to be the most rewarding part for me, is if I kind of see you return and just see your growth and progress,
Yeah, I think
beautiful.
that's really beautiful and really special. And just for a final question, given the fact that a lot of the year 13s are starting their application process, is there any advice that you'd want to give to these year 13s who'll be applying in a few months?
I think this is, and giving advice is something that I can be direct with in counseling, and I try not to do that, in college counseling, but I try not to do that in social emotional counseling, just because it feels like it has a different feel. So I think if anything right now is trying to balance. And if you feel like you can't balance, then you have to prioritize your time to do your college applications, because we can all appreciate the fact that not only that you're completing whatever curriculum you're doing. There's a lot of practicums in BTECs. There's a lot of tests and exams. There's a lot of IAs and papers in IB. So there's a lot of things that you have to do academically. There's a lot of things that I know you're doing extracurricularly, if that's the word, volunteering. you're also trying to sleep, and you're also trying to have fun. So when do you actually find time for college applications? If you feel like you can't find that balance, then you have to come to Mr. Tucker or myself, and we will sit there and just do it with you. You know, if anything is prioritizing that time, come sit down for an hour a week where you can chip away at your application if you feel like you can't do it on your own, you know? So it's almost like setting up that priority for yourself. And I would say my second would be to also allow yourself to not be on track, you know? So set priorities, but if you're kind of off track a little bit, just be kind to yourself, just because I feel like students put a lot of pressure on themselves, and we do too. And, you know, even though we come from a place of love, and sometimes it could be really overwhelming, like when I just sent out 10 emails about setting up appointments to come see me. So if you're like, oh gosh, Miss Amy's email again, give yourself a pat on the back, you know, and say, it's okay, I'll do this next week, or I'll just go talk to her in person, or whatever that is. So I think it's keeping yourself as let me take it back. Prioritize as much as you can, and if you can't, shrug your shoulders and start over.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that. Like, I definitely think that that was low-key something that I need to hear as well. Do you feel the same way?
I agree. I think overall, your last year of school, it's bittersweet. Even if we just forget about the academics, and if you forget about university counseling, leaving a place that you've been with for a long time, leaving your friends, can be emotionally draining. So having support, coordinating and communicating with your counselors and everyone around you brings everything to a center and helps you, it prevents you from losing like focus on everything that's going on.
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining us. I love talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for being
And
on the podcast.
Thank you
And
for having me.
thank you for everyone watching on YouTube.
And thank you for listening on any of our other platforms.